Hey guys, it's from QC with GameDev, and today I want to talk about services. So, an issue I ran into really quickly was the issue of the content of the tiles on my board, right? So, inspired by the board game Karak, my game was basically made up of a bunch of 2D tiles, and there's a few things that can happen on tiles, right? So, players can move around on them. There can be items dropped on them. These items can be weapons, spells, keys. There can be enemies on them. There can be treasures on them. So there's a bunch of things that can happen on these tiles, right? So in the past, whenever I tried to make a board game type of video game, I would have some kind of a tile system, and each tile would basically be made up of an address of some kind, right? Like a position, on the board. And then inside, I had some nameless field called content that basically would have the ability of becoming, whatever I would need it to be, right? So on the surface, this looks fine, but then it's like, well, maybe we can define a base type called base content, right? And then I can define whatever child types I want from this, like enemy content, item content, whatever. So this works, but then you basically need to have your tile with a list of every possible type. Because suppose that on my one tile, I can have a bunch of enemies, a bunch of items, a bunch of weapons, right? So on that one tile, I would have to have this massive list of whatever could be on that tile, right? So it's you can do that, that works. But it's just with every new functionality, you're just adding more to that tile content, right? So it occurred to me in that scenario that basically the definition of the tile was getting affected by the functionality that I was adding to the tile, which again works. There's nothing terribly wrong with this, but I didn't like the dependency that was introducing. So basically what I did is, instead of putting all my possible data as a part of my tile definition, I let the tile be made up of only an address. So in my case, only a position, right? So really, we don't even need a tile definition. All we need are coordinates in a board model, right? So I have my board model and I'll just say, okay, these are all the addresses that exist, right? So we'll say these represent each tile's address, right? So in our case, we're making a 2D board, so there's no third dimension. We can use the vector2 int data type, so it's really just two numbers and they're just integers, right? So I'll just suppose address 0, 0 is my starting node, and everything that comes after is just expressed with respect to this, right? So anything else I want to add as a content of a node can exist as a separate service consuming my board model, right? So my board model is a model. We're still using our MVVM terminology here, responsible solely for managing the existing addresses. Next, suppose I want to look at player movement first, right? So I have an existing player class made up of only the player name, let's just say, right? It's really all I need, okay? Then I can define a player movement service that consumes the board model. So the player movement service is responsible for associating a given player to a given address. And that's really all he does. So notice how my player movement service conceptually is allowing me to add functionality to my tile, but doesn't alter the tile definition at all, right? So the player movement service could be there or not be there. It doesn't matter to the board, right? He's just existing in parallel but consuming that board, right? So it's advantageous because I could add or remove functionality super easily, and the board is just going to keep working totally independent of that. All of a sudden, it's trivial to add enemies, weapons, spells, keys, whatever you want, So all you need to do is consume the board model and at least make sure that the given tile position you're associating to that data exists and is legit, and you're good to go, So I wouldn't want to give my player position a position that doesn't exist, for instance, right? So this was a really big dev revolution moment for me. It was a really great way to do things. And I'm for sure never going back. As much as possible, uncouple things. Absolutely try to leverage services to add new functionality to a model in parallel to that model where possible, because it makes life way easier, right? So I did that for I did an item tile service, I did an enemy tile service, treasure tile service. I did all these things in parallel, and it was super easy. So another way I used services in this project was in trying to centralize code that was repeated often and consumed more than one model. So for instance, I made a GameActionService that was responsible for allowing us to end the round given some action or to end the player turn. The reason I needed this was because some actions in the player round end the player's turn while others don't. So for instance, movement simply consumes a player action, but then it's still the same player's turn. He can keep moving, he can keep doing whatever he wants, right? If a player enters combat, however, no matter the result, it ends their turn. If they win, if they lose, if it's a draw, their turn ends at the end, right? So unless they either have a specific skill that makes it so that if they roll a 6, they keep playing, that's like a special exception, or they have another skill where they're able to sneak past enemies, that's another special exception. So the service I made was for consuming a few different models, and this code of like decrement the player action count or end the player turn was something I really needed to use in a few different spots, so it made a lot of sense for me to centralize this functionality. So yeah, guys, that's it. I just wanted to share that with you. This was like a really big discovery for me. I hope it helps whoever sees this. I'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy.